Hi dear students, our lesson today is about comparative and superlative adjectives. Our lesson today is about comparative and superlative adjectives. Some rules about forming comparatives and superlatives. Some rules about forming comparatives and superlatives. One-syllable adjectives generally form the comparative by adding er and the superlative by adding est. For example, adjective soft, in the comparative case it becomes softer, in the superlative case it becomes the softest. Cheap, cheaper, the cheapest. Sweet, sweeter, the sweetest. Thin, thinner, the thinnest. Spelling rules. Note that if a one-syllable adjective ends in a single vowel letter followed by a single consonant letter, the consonant letter is doubled. For example, thin, thinner, big, bigger, or biggest. If an adjective ends in E, this is removed when adding er, est. For example, wide. We remove E and add er or est. It becomes wider or widest. If an adjective ends in a consonant followed by y is replaced by I when adding er or est. For example, dry. We remove y and then add I. It becomes drier or driest. Two-syllable adjectives. Two-syllable adjectives which end in y usually form the comparative by adding er and the superlative by adding est. Note the change of y to I in the comparative and superlative, e.g., for example, the adjective lucky in the comparative case becomes luckier. We remove y and we add ier, and in the superlative case it becomes the luckiest. Pretty, prettier, the prettiest. Tidy, tidier, the tidiest. Two-syllable adjectives. Two-syllable adjectives ending in ed, ing, full, or less, less, always form the comparative with more and the superlative with the most. For example, worried. In the comparative case it becomes more worried. In the superlative case it becomes the most worried. Boring, more boring, the most boring. Careful, more careful, the most careful. Useless, more useless, the most useless. Three-syllable adjectives. Adjective, dangerous, more dangerous, the most dangerous. Difficult, more difficult, the most difficult. Adjectives which have three or more syllables always form the comparative and superlative with more and the most, as we have just mentioned in the examples in the table. The only exceptions are some three-syllable adjectives which have been formed by adding the prefix "an" to another adjective, especially those formed from an adjective ending in y. These adjectives can form comparatives and superlatives by using more or most or adding er or est. For example, unhappy, unhappier, the unhappiest, the most unhappy. Irregular adjectives. Good, in the comparative form it becomes better, in the superlative form it becomes the best. Bad, in the comparative form it becomes worse, and in the superlative form it becomes the worst. Far, it becomes farther or further, and the farthest or the furthest. Use of comparatives. Comparatives are very commonly followed by than and a pronoun or noun group in order to describe who the other person or thing involved in the comparison is. For example, John is taller than me. Notice here we have than after taller. I think that she's more intelligent than her sister. I think that she's more intelligent than her sister. Other uses of comparatives. Comparatives are often qualified by using words and phrases such as much, a lot of, far, a bit, little, slightly, etc. For example, you should go by train, it would be much cheaper. It would be much cheaper. Could you be a bit quieter? I'm feeling a lot better. Do you have one that's slightly bigger? Two comparatives can be contrasted by placing the before them, indicating that a change in one quality is linked to a change in another. For example, the smaller the gift, the easier it is to send. The more stressed you are, the worse it is for your health. Two comparatives can also be linked with and to show a continuing increase in a particular quality. For example, the sea was getting rougher and rougher. Her illness was becoming worse and worse. He became more and more tired as the weeks went by. Use of superlatives. The use of superlatives. Like comparatives, superlatives can be placed before nouns in the attributive position, or occur after be and other link verbs. For example, the most delicious chocolate cake I've ever eaten. Annabelle was the youngest. Annabelle was the youngest. This restaurant is the best. As shown in the second two examples, superlatives are often used on their own if it is clear what or who is being compared. If you want to be specific about what you are comparing, you can do this with a noun or a phrase beginning with in or of. For example, Annabelle was the youngest child. Annabelle was the youngest of the children. This restaurant is the best in town. The opposites of comparative and superlatives. The opposites of comparative and superlatives. We use the forms less, the opposite of comparative, more, and the least, the opposite of superlative, the most. Less is used to indicate that something or someone does not have as much of a particular quality as someone or something else. For example, this sofa is less comfortable. I've always been less patient than my sister. The least is used to indicate that something or someone has less of a quality than any other person or thing of its kind. For example, it's the least expensive way to travel. She was the least intelligent of the three sisters. Now we come to the end of our lesson. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, I wish you the best of luck and goodbye.